From the California State Senate, this is Senate Spotlight.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Senate Spotlight, where we discuss legislative priorities, policy, and other related issues with members of the California State Senate. From the state capitol here in Sacramento, I'm Brian Green, and joining us once again here at the Senate Spotlight desk is State Senator Ted Lieu from the 28th Senate District here in California, Southern California, the Torrance area, and other hamlets around. Welcome, sir. Glad to have you with us again.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. And you and your colleagues, I know, are very busy with bill deadlines and getting your legislation shored up and the language, all the different elements, looking at opposition support, assigning policy committees. I know it's a busy time for you folks. I know probably no legislator has not had a constituent or someone come up to them and say, there's just too many bills out there, too many laws. What do you as a legislator who's crafting these laws say to that?
Well, California is the 8th or 9th largest economy in the world. And so you do have a very complex state with lots of different complex issues. So some of these laws are making other laws better. Some of these laws are repealing other laws. Some are creating new ones. But as society changes, you're just going to have new laws because you have new situations happen.
And I know that you are authoring legislation that really is focused on people's lives in the moment, in the now, even as events unfold. And I don't mean that glibly. I mean, you're looking at problems going on in our society and in our economy and addressing them, correct?
Yes. One of my goals is to fix problems that constituents bring to me, and also fix problems that are statewide that affect lots of different types of issues and people.
Well, let's actually get into some of those. There's a handful of them that are coming up here, getting ready for policy committee. One piece of legislation I know that's gelling in terms of the language and in terms of the mandates and details is your legislation seeking transparency in campaign financing. You and Senator Yee have a two-bill package that strengthens the Political Reform Act and shining the light on those who fund the campaigns that we deal with. Tell us about SB 2.
Sure. It's sponsored by California Common Cause as well as the League of Women Voters, and it seeks to bring sunshine and transparency to our campaign finance system. Here are some of the things it does. For example, when you see a commercial with a for a federal election, the person will say at the end, I'm Joe Smith and I approve this ad. If it is a state or a city or any other kind of election, they don't have to do that. So our bill makes a requirement that they in fact do that so that the viewers know that they have approved the ad. It also requires the top 4 funders of a ad for a ballot initiative to disclose who they actually are. It imposes penalties for violations of the campaign finance laws, increases transparency in the slate mailers, which can often be confusing to people. And so this really tries to revamp the finance campaign system to make it more transparent so folks know what's going on. And
I know in our last time together we talked about the Citizens United case in the state U.S. Supreme Court that sort of lit the fire for some of these activities, and it was really Proposition 30 last year here in California in November where we saw some of the alleged evidence of the secrecy in terms of campaign contributions that really lit the fire, I guess, and showed how people can bend the rules to do what they want to do.
Correct. And this is part of a bill package that addresses issues like that as well as other campaign issues. So my SB2 takes a portion of the campaign finance problems that we're trying to fix. It also increases reporting in terms of how often folks have to report, which would also make the system more transparent.
Are the penalties that you talk about, are they strict enough to discourage some of the bad actors in this process?
I don't believe so, and that's why I'm increasing those penalties.
And in the bill, you consider those penalties strong enough as well,
That
right?
is correct. We're essentially doubling the penalties.
Mm-hmm. And California's Political Reform Act is one of the strongest in the nation, and it has been up to this point. Obviously, there's always going to be somebody that's going to try to find a way to bend the rules. Right. Just your response and your comment on that, as your law becomes effective, people are going to try to look for ways to get around it.
So that goes back to your first point about various new laws and bills that people are proposing. As we discover new situations where people are trying to take advantage of the system, it will sometimes require a new law to shut that down. And that's why you do see continuously new laws to deal with evolving situations where people try to take advantage of the system, and you need to have a way to correct it.
Well, speaking of taking advantage of the system, here's another piece of legislation that you're authoring. A lot of controversy around the issue. Legislation making it a felony for a parolee to disable a GPS device. It's a serious issue. In fact, there's been a story now in the LA Times and a Department of Justice study about the recidivism rate of sex offenders. And here in California with the realignment issues, a lot of the sex offenders removing their bracelets and not even serving any jail time here in the county because there's just not enough space for it. Talk about the problem and what your bill does to address it.
Sure. So various media investigations, including the latest one by the Los Angeles Times, showed that 3,400 sex offenders were cutting off or tampering with their GPS devices in the last 15 to 16 months. That's thousands of the highest risk, dangerous offenders that we need to have monitored removing their devices. And this is a huge problem. When you look at the number of sex offenders in California, it's about 600,000, but only a small group, less than 9,000 or so, are required to wear these GPS tracking devices. They are the most dangerous group, and they're cutting them off. And our GPS monitoring system is at risk of failure if we don't have a strong hammer to make sure that they don't cut those devices off. One reason they're cutting them off is they've realized that they don't get a lot of negative consequences for doing so. They don't get sent back to state prison. It's viewed as only a technical parole violation, not a new crime, so they can only get at most 180 days in county jail. And a lot of counties are so overcrowded, they don't even book these offenders, or if they do, they're only there for a few days or a few weeks. So my bill, SB 57, makes it a new felony to disable a GPS device, punishable by up to 1, 2, or 3 years in state prison.
And these things are already designed to be removed in theory, right? So it's not too hard to take them off if nobody's looking, or nobody's going to hold them accountable.
That is correct. They are not made of titanium or steel, so they can be taken off. That is correct.
And you've considered this serious enough, you've made this an urgency measure now, so it'll take effect upon passage, signing by the governor?
That's it. We're amending the bill to make it an urgency measure because the problem is escalating. And again, we're not dealing with shoplifters. We're dealing with high-risk sex offenders who have very high recidivism rates. So a United States Department of Justice funded study showed that sex offenders who were being monitored with GPS had a rate of recidivism 3 times less than those who didn't. So in other words, if you cut off your GPS device, there's a 300% increase in the chances of you committing a new sex crime. Eventually, you'll be caught again, and then you'll be sent back to state prison for a very lengthy prison term. So my bill, SB 57, will actually reduce prison overcrowding by reducing the number of new sex crimes that happen.
And again, here again, the example in the bill authoring 101, here's the example of a problem that has come up as a result of another law or another issue, and you're working to fix it. I mean, let's go back to that rate. You said the 3,400 arrest warrants issued since the end of last year, October 2012. In fact, that's about the same time that realignment started to take effect, and I guess it comes to the bigger issue also about realignment. Do you think it's being effective? Is this an example of some of the things that people have talked about? Oh my gosh, prisoners are going to be out in the streets, crimes are going to be committed. What do you say to the overall issue of realignment?
Sure.
And that's part of it.
I voted for realignment. I support realignment. It has largely been successful. But in all my years in the legislature, I have never seen a perfect law, and there never will be a perfect law. And there's always ways to make laws better. The aspect of GPS monitoring simply wasn't well thought out at the time of the vote on realignment, and this is the issue that needs to be fixed, and so I have the bill to fix it. But that's what happens in the legislative process. You put laws out there, they do good things, but sometimes they have unintended consequences, and so you come back and you fix them.
Another issue becoming law on a federal level and also here in the state is the Affordable Care Act and the implementation of health care reform. It opens doors and access to health care for thousands of Californians, and yet it also opens doors and access to a lot of unscrupulous dealers who want to take advantage of the situation, particularly in promoting and advertising for health care reform, kind of this buy insurance from us, buy health care from us, leaving people vulnerable to deceptive and costly practices. Tell us how this new piece of legislation you're also authoring that will address that element of the Affordable Care Act.
Right. And again, here's another example of why we need a new law, because we now have a new situation. When the Affordable Care Act goes in full implementation, we're going to have about 6 million or so people get health insurance who never got them before. These are primarily folks in lower income situations. Many of them don't have English as their first language. And so you're going to have all these healthcare insurance companies send them solicitations in different languages saying, you know, sign up with my healthcare plan. Right now, if it is an HMO product, the Department of Managed Care gets to review those solicitations or those brochures, which are in foreign languages, to make sure that they're not misleading the consumer or saying something that's not true or false just so they can sign them up into the healthcare plan. However, if someone has a PPO insurance product, there is no such review. And so my bill will give the Department of Insurance, which regulates PPO health insurance products, the ability to review these brochures and solicitations, which are in different languages, to make sure that they're accurate and not misleading the consumer.
Is the federal act addressing this in any way, so the states don't necessarily have to perform triage here on this?
So the federal act does not have that requirement, and the fear is when you all of a sudden open up 6 to 7 million more people who are going to get health insurance, you're going to have a lot of people trying to get them as customers, and they may say things in different languages that may or may not be true. We want to have some sort of check on it to make sure that they're not misleading people.
Is the industry, insurance industry, supportive of this? Healthcare industry?
No, they are not. But we believe because the HMO products already have this review, there's no reason that we can't extend it to the PPO products as well.
From your perspective as a legislator, bigger picture on the Affordable Health Care Act and the way we implement it here in California, we are already farther ahead in setting up the marketplace for this, more so than other states. But we still have some major policy decisions to make, notwithstanding, but also including this element of it. How do you think California is doing and will fare as we implement this Affordable Health Care Act in this state in less than a year?
I think we'll do well. Again, we're going to provide health care coverage to millions of people, and that is a very good thing. But as I said before, no law is ever perfect. There are going to be issues that we have to address, problems we have to fix. And so I'm carrying one bill that addresses one aspect of it, but as new situations arise, we will look at it and try to fix it. And one of the reasons I'm in a legislator is try to fix these problems, and I get some of my best ideas from people that just call our office and tell us about problems there are. And so if folks just want to call my office and let me know about problems, we will look into it.
Great. I didn't expect this to necessarily be such a tutorial on bill authorship, but it's a great lesson in where legislation comes from, where the ideas come from, and how you address issues and try to think ahead even in the future to protect Californians. You have another one coming up here that's already especially causing, not the bill itself, but the issue causing controversy, particularly in Southern California, and that's the swatting. Now, it sounds provocative, kind of a ripped from the headlines kind of thing, but really it's a serious issue where you have prank calls to 911 operators, and it's causing a lot of confusion, costing a lot of money. Tell us about that bill.
Sure. So the term swatting comes from not just a false 911 call, but the fact that the call made it seem so dangerous that law enforcement sent a SWAT team or something of its equivalence to that location, which not only costs a lot of money, but also could be a public safety problem. And so you have these instances where people are calling and making these false calls, and because of new technology, the 911 operator can't tell that this person is faking it. It actually looks like a call, for example, is happening from Clint Eastwood's home.
In fact, he was, I think, one of the most recent ones, wasn't he, that was a
yes.
victim of this?
And so imagine if a SWAT team, let's say deployed to an actor's home, and they had their own private security, and it's at night. You could see some dangerous miscommunications where the private security is wondering where are all these folks running around with guns, and the SWAT team is there, and they see some person in there outside who has a gun, and something bad could happen. And then it's a drain on resources. Originally this started, and it still happens, with just regular citizens who had grudges against other citizens. And so it's not just a celebrity issue, it affects a lot of people. And I have a bill that seeks to, first of all, make the perpetrator responsible for all costs associated with the event. So if law enforcement has to spend thousands of dollars sending out all these law enforcement folks to this event, then the perpetrator would have to cover that. makes it easier to also prosecute a felony for this offense. Currently, there's a felony on the books for this, but it's hard to prosecute. We make it somewhat easier. And the bill's message is to tell these perpetrators that this is not a game. If you do this and you're caught, you're going to go to jail and you will be held responsible for all costs.
Great. Well, we're just about out of time here. Interesting conversation and dialogue on these very important bills, and I suppose in a perfect world it would be nice to say that as is, this is the way it's going to move through the process. I know the process, though, has included a lot of nuancing and negotiation and working bills and moving them through the houses, so still a lot of work ahead of you, I know, on these bills, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, well, Senator, I hope we can bring you back. Let's do this again to talk about some of the other legislation, and as these bills move through the process, bring them up again and talk about them again. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, Senator Ted Lieu is our guest from the 28th Senate District down in Southern California, and that is it for this edition of Senate Spotlight. Please join us next time around as we discuss important legislative issues and policies with the newsmakers and newsbreakers of the California State Senate. From the state capitol in Sacramento, I'm Brian Green. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Senate Spotlight.